When I saw the announcement for Valorant a few years back, one phrase really rubbed me the wrong way.
It's competitive.
When I first heard it, it came off as a bit self-important or even pretentious, but hearing it now after how many shooters advertise themselves that way, it's even worse now. There's a paradox with games that market themselves as competitive that mainly make sure that they're going to be a bad experience. Because if a game is going to market itself as appealing to one side, it will surely neglect the other 9 times out of 10. If you look at the launch of these so-called competitive games, most of the time they completely lack content. Valorant had only 4 maps on release, which is downright pitiful. Maps are key for replayability and overall quality of an FPS game, and only having 4 is pathetic. And we haven't even talked about the map design yet, because we'll get there later. Another example of this is Halo Infinite, which had a notorious lack of content on release. It also had 343 have a large emphasis on it being competitive, which failed because your esports scene isn't going to be big if your game lacks a player base to begin with. This problem with maps could have been solved by Forge, a historically great feature in every Halo game from 3 onwards, but there's one problem. They delay it to almost a year after release. This is another common trait of these games marketed as esports. They barely have any external content. What I'm referring to is different game modes, social features, modding tools, you name it. Valorant only recently has started to add a casual mode that isn't ranked with the cool icon, and no Spike Rush doesn't count. It's more of a gimmick. The game modes that are added to these games are mostly gimmicky, leaving no middle ground between people who want a wacky experience and sweats from the underworld. The average player just wants a plain experience of the game without much time committed or consequences, and modern games fail delivering more of this. There's another factor contributing to this, which is one of the most controversial topics in gaming right now, the unholy 4-letter acronym, SBMM. The skill-based matchmaking debate has 2 camps eternally at war with each other. One that claims it's bad for the game because they have to sweat all the time, or the other is claiming that the other side needs to get good and they just want to stomp new players. Discounting the fact that the SBMM defenders are already arguing in bad faith, there's another part of the SBMM puzzle. Visible skill progression. In any game you want to dedicate yourself to, you want to improve it. You first see yourself doing badly, then you see yourself doing less bad. Eventually, you become a decent player, and you get the idea. This was my experience with Team Fortress 2, a game that doesn't have SBMM. This was mostly the same with Titanfall 2, but with a lot of other shooters like Halo Infinite, Overwatch, and Valorant. I was constantly switching between top scoring and getting owned. Before any of you guys say, if you want a skill progression metric, just play ranked. That's still not a perfect solution. I like to play games casually most of the time, but also want to feel I'm getting better at a game without having to fret over every win and loss. With modern FPS games, you can't really gauge your improvement without going into ranked, and quite frankly, it just feels better for you to visibly see that you're doing better than the game just tell you that you're doing better. Some skill-based matchmaking is okay, as that was literally the purpose of the first matchmaking system in Halo 2, but modern implementations focus on trying to artificially drive engagement. This engagement-based matchmaking makes most games devolve into gambling whether you get the better team or not, making the game less fun. Something else that makes games less fun is modern map design. I hate modern FPS map design with a passion. You have all these hero shooters which are so quirky, so relatable, cast in crazy sci-fi worlds, and what do? Make the most boring, safe maps imaginable. Valorant's maps have some gimmicks, but they never really commit to them. It's really saying something that the most interesting map in the game could just pass as a standard Counter-Strike map. Overwatch's map design is even worse. Most maps just funnel you down to objective with barely usable flanks with no interesting verticality to account for the movement. And to see Halo Infinite's map design compared to Halo 3's is just infuriating to how so less creative it is. I could make a whole rant video on this subject, but that's for later. Why are these maps so boring? Competitive viability, because apparently interesting map design is never competitively viable in any other game. The worst part is, these games don't have a map maker, so you can't just say, these maps are garbage, I'm gonna make my own, because community-created content has never been worth the effort in any video game ever. Trust me. Now, all of this would be fine if the games happen to be competitively richer than most games on the market, but here's the big plot twist. In most cases, they aren't. Competitive games are not more competitive. Okay, that's a bit much. What's more accurate to say is that they're less competitive than their predecessors. Halo Infinite tries to flaunt itself as competitive all day long, but the positioning and aiming is much more forgiving than the original trilogy. If you're gonna go, but the movement, Halo 5's already got you covered there. Valorant is Counter-Strike with a lot of the edges smoothed out, with some of those edges also containing a lot of the skill ceiling. This is slightly admirable if you want to make a more accessible game, but Counter-Strike 2 is looking to beat at its own game by allowing easier knowledge of spray patterns along with a more reliable way to practice lineups, keeping the skill ceiling while lowering the barrier to entry. If these games are supposed to be the cutting edge of competition, why are they still failing to live up to their forefathers in the skill ceiling department? I believe that these games aren't looking to be fun to play, but rather a game specifically designed to being fun to watch. The first obvious reason to believe this is the huge push towards esports with no competitive history behind the game. Both Valorant and Overwatch do this, and while Valorant can get away with this because it's basically a Counter-Strike clone with a flood of modern mechanics, the Overwatch League is a massive joke. You can't force an esport. End of story. Another reason I have to believe this is the large presence of these games on Twitch. These games focus on ranked grinds and being flashy to watch, however not requiring too much skill so any wannabe Shroud can get in on it. This is also a reason a lot of these games don't have a good variety of content around them. A lot of videos made around these games are ranked highlights or general game state discussion. You also have a myriad of people playing these games solely based on how fun they are to watch rather than how fun they are to play, like pushing for putting mechanics like sprinting, ADS, and clamber in every game, or putting a battle royale mode in every game as well. And I hate this mode because it just causes every game to be homogenous. The casuals don't get fun new game modes that aren't just gimmicks, the tryhards don't get mechanically rich games, and the only people who benefit are the people who watch from the sidelines. But if you see any discourse about modern games, it's usually streamers complaining about how gaming is declining. One Twitter thread from Wildcat really drives this point home, how he complains about how every game is the same, but refuses to play anything too different because it needs to have a wide online audience. If you're going to be only playing anything that has mass appeal, you're basically drowning in blandness. And when all you keep asking for never being able to ranked grind or battle royale, you're just going to keep seeking under that gray goo the industry keeps producing. So next time a pseudo-competitive shooter comes out, let it die. With Halo Infinite's failure, hopefully we learn that we should always focus on esports. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.